We are now joined by Matt George, host of Locked On Kings, to discuss the surging Sacramento Kings. You might see the Celtics at the top of the league for the last 10 games, but right behind them, the Sacramento Kings, who have won 5 games in a row and 8 of their last 10, and have beaten some very good teams in that span. The Cleveland Cavaliers, last year's champion Golden State Warriors, hanging 150 on the Brooklyn Nets the other night. The Kings look very good. Matt, what has incited this incredible run from the Sacramento basketball team?
Well, Tony, first off, offensively, Sacramento is at the top of the league now, which we knew that this team had offensive firepower, and that was one of the major disappointments of Sacramento last year is they were supposed to be this tremendously good offensive team that struggled on the defensive end of the floor. Last year, they sucked defensively, and for some reason, the offense sucked too. This year, the defense slowly getting better. Still need a lot of work on that area of the ball. But offensively, Sacramento right now they're clicking on all cylinders. They're getting major contributions from the bench. I think over this stretch, they're averaging over 50 bench points per game. They had over 80 bench points in the 153-point win over the Brooklyn Nets. And in that game, De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis only combined for 31 points. Terrence Davis was the only player on the Kings to score more than 20. So you think about that. The Kings score 153 points with only one player scoring more than 20 points. That just goes to show how well the Kings are moving the ball. They lead the league in passes. Like the ball is moving around, and they have guys that are just shooting out of their mind. Kevin Huerter is shooting over 50% from three-point range. Some nights Terrence Davis will go off the bench. Some nights Malik Monk will go off the bench. De'Aaron Fox has not had to put his team on his back as much as he's had to in the past, but even so, when it comes to winning time, he's the guy scoring and leading the Kings, and then everything runs through Domantas Sabonis, who really is the spine, the backbone, the foundation of this Kings offense. So offensively, Sacramento is playing so well that even with their defensive pitfalls and their defensive struggles, it really hasn't become a factor, which is something that we haven't been able to say in Sacramento for, since I was a child.
It's funny you say that about De'Aaron Fox because you look at his stats and he's taking less shots per game than either of the last 2 seasons, and yet efficient from absolutely everywhere. His career high in both 3 and 2 point percentage right now. So his stats still look fantastic. What's ignited his play? Because he's in the All-Star conversation right now.
Well, honestly, he's playing better because there's less on his shoulders. He's playing in bursts in like 6 to 7 minute stretches to where he'll start a game and the Kings could use some big performances from him. In fact, the Kings are coming off of a win the other night where it wasn't the cleanest win for the Sacramento Kings over the San Antonio Spurs, but Mike Brown challenged De'Aaron Fox in that game to have a big game coming off of the Brooklyn game where he only scored 14 points and the Kings only really needed him to score 14 points in that game. Mike Brown challenged him to have a big game, so he drops 28 points. I think it was 28 points. Also dishes out like 8 assists and led the league led the Kings in plus minus. He was like a plus 31 or plus 32 or something like that. Just something ridiculous. And he did it on like 15 shots. So he's shooting tremendously more efficiently. He's making his shots, especially his three-point shot is falling. His free throws have looked tremendously better. Like he's a career mid to low 70s shooting from the free throw line. He's in the mid to high 80s this season and looks just extremely comfortable there. And ultimately, like the Kings aren't relying on him so heavily that the reason why he's doing so well closing games in the fourth quarter, the reason why he leads the league in clutch points is because really he has a lot of energy to give at the end of games because he's not being run as ragged and used as hard. Plus, he still is incredibly fast, one of the fastest players in the league, but he doesn't just have to solely rely on that anymore. De'Aaron Fox plays like he knows he can get anywhere he wants on the floor, whether it's his mid-range game, his three-point game, getting to the rim, and he doesn't have to just sprint to get there. He's crafty, he's quick, he gets other teammates involved. He's a playmaker, or in the sense that he draws so much attention with his offensive scoring ability that he can find open men and open up opportunities for his teammates, but he's not like a floor general point guard. Those duties have been taken off of his shoulders by Domantas Sabonis, and he's just absolutely thriving.
Yeah, speaking of Sabonis, that was a big move for the Kings last year, going all in on the two-time All-Star, all in on this core of the lefties, as I like to call them, from not Sacramento, of Fox plus Sabonis together. And the first 6 games, Sabonis' stats weren't as impressive, but in the Kings' last 8, 21 points, 11 rebounds per game, shooting very well from the field. Has he been as advertised for the Kings? Has his all-star play translated? And how much has he been a factor for this team's success? You called him the backbone in their recent hot stretch.
Well, the big difference with the start of the season, Sabonis' struggles and what he's doing now is he's able to stay on the floor. Sabonis dealt with a ton of foul trouble early on in the season. Now, the Kings also felt that he was not being officiated properly. And the Kings, if you look at, I mean, they've won 8 of their last 10 games. The 2 games they lost were both by questionable officiating, which if you look at the last 2-minute reports of both those games, the league admitted they got it wrong. They missed a Tyler Hero travel on a game-winning bucket, and Klay Thompson absolutely mugged Kevin Huerter in Golden State, trying to tie the game with a 3-point shot, and they didn't call it. Should have been a foul. Again, there's no guarantee that the Kings would have won both those games, even if those calls. Kevin Huerter still has to hit 3 free throws. Tyler Hero's shot doesn't count. Game goes to overtime on the road. Who knows? So Kings aren't necessarily claiming that they should be 10-0 over this stretch. But going back to the Domantas Sabonis question, he's staying on the floor, and that's allowing him to ultimately feel and get comfortable just playing basketball the way that he knows how to play. And Tony, you know this very well, of course, with Locked On Pacers and how much you've watched him. Like, he's so multi-skilled, so multi-talented, and he's so easy to play with. Like, Kevin Huerter's shooting percentage when assisted by Domantas Sabonis is like astronomical. It's ridiculous. And it's because the two of them play so well off of each other. They've developed a really good pick and roll game, of course, De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. And if I could take this platform to talk some talk a little bit here, because I know, Tony, you've seen a lot of this, but you've been on the right side of this. Tyrese Halliburton is an incredibly exciting player. I think the Indiana Pacers, who are thriving right now, too, should be absolutely thrilled with what they got in Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield, who I wasn't too fond of and didn't play very well over the last couple of years of his career here in Sacramento. He's playing much better. So the Indiana Pacers should feel very good about that trade. But there have been so many false narratives that have trashed the Kings for that trade, saying, how in the world could you give up a player with the upside of Tyrese Halliburton? It's because the Sacramento Kings got a 2-time All-Star in Domantas Sabonis, someone who fits next to De'Aaron Fox, someone who De'Aaron Fox hasn't played with at any point over the course of his career, who could take some of the load off Fox, and we're seeing the results of that. So we need to back it up, or some apologies need to be issued towards the Kings organization by, it's not just fans, it's not just, it's national media members who have chosen to only focus on what the Pacers and what Tyrese Halliburton is doing and not pay attention to what the Sacramento Kings, De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis are doing because of that trade. It's possible for both teams to win a trade. Both teams are clearly doing better because of this move, and it's time for that to be recognized, not just one team over the other.
I'm 100% with you on that. And I think what happens with Sabonis a lot is people laser in on what he does specifically as an individual with his stats. But we saw this with the Pacers, and you just mentioned it with Kevin Huerter. Justin Holiday, Doug McDermott, those guys play much better with Sabonis because the way they are as movement shooters, they become better. So Kevin Huerter, who has more skills than either of those two guys by a mile, but also is a fantastic shooter, not only is Sabonis doing what he does, but now Kevin Huerter's also better, or whatever shooter or wing you want to insert into that conversation. Sabonis does so much well. And yeah, it's been a win-win trade for both teams. But Matt, the Kings, now that the Mariners made the playoffs, have the drought. I hate to bring it up to you, but I use that segue to say 8-2 in their last 10 games in the playoff picture in the West. Is this sustainable? Is this the year it's going to happen in Sacramento?
Well, that's a great question. I'll get to that in a second. I also want to mention, too, the Kings are trying to win their 6th straight tonight against the Detroit Pistons. The Kings have not won 6 straight since 2004-2005, that season. So that just goes to show how long it's been, right? You talk about that streak. But I love that you asked, is this sustainable? Because the answer is yes. Now, if the Kings were scoring 153 points every night and getting 31 points out of Terrence Davis every night, then I'd say, okay, that's not sustainable. And there's elements of this that aren't sustainable, like Kevin Huerter shooting over 50% from three-point range. At some point, that's going to come back down, right? But the way the Kings are winning, they're getting multiple contributions from multiple different players. Different guys are stepping up on any given night. De'Aaron Fox is playing extremely well, but not out of his mind. Like, there were stretches in the past couple of seasons where Fox was winning Western Conference Player of the Week awards because he was scoring 40 to 50 points a game and literally dragging the Kings to a win. That's not sustainable. But the way the Kings are playing, running their offense through Domantas Sabonis, defense being just good enough, coming back when they're in early holes, finding ways to secure wins at home. I still think one of the big humps that this team is going to have to learn and to get over, and they're going to really be tested with this upcoming road trip against Memphis, Atlanta, and Boston, is how do you close winnable games against good playoff teams on the road? That's a lesson I think they still need to learn. But the way the Kings are playing basketball right now, it's not easy, but it's possible to imagine them carrying that out or even growing upon it at times. Now, they're also going to take steps back. Head coach Mike Brown has been very open about that. There's no way the Kings, as much as we would love the winning streak to go through all the way to game 82, it's probably not going to happen. Kings are going to take steps back. There's going to be bumps in the road. Also, Sacramento has been very fortunate with their injury bug so far this season. So there's certain elements that could fluctuate a little bit, that could affect things, but the Kings are playing great basketball right now, and it's not their peak. I think that's the best way to answer the question. They can get better, and they can continue to play like this for not a whole season, but most likely a majority of the season, and that should be good enough for them to be in the playoff conversation in the Western Conference. Certainly not at the top of the conference, but in the conversation.
Kings half game out of the 4th spot in the Western Conference. Matt George will have more for that over at Locked On Kings. Matt, thank you for the time.
Tony, it's a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you out here in Sacramento when Halliburton returns. It'll be a triumphant return for him. And everybody, pay attention to Kings basketball a little bit. It's entertaining. It's fun. They're playing well right now. Don't just disregard them because of the name on the front of the jersey.